Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today is another beautiful day near the end of October in Utah Zone 6/7. And I am finishing up a lot of my garden chores just before a hard freeze. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to get our first hard freeze of the year. We haven't even really had a frost yet. It's been a beautiful, beautiful fall. No complaints on my end. But it's time to get everything out of the garden that can't take a hard freeze. And I realized that it's actually time for me to harvest my ashwagandha. Now, if you haven't heard of ashwagandha, it's an herb that is grown in India usually. You use it for the roots, and it actually helps me sleep really well. I have restless leg. It has helped my restless leg. Now, just as a caveat, and a warning here, I am not an herbalist. I am not a doctor. And anything that I suggest that has to do with medicine, please take it with a grain of salt. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I know just that it has helped me. And if you're going to be using any herbs, I suggest that you talk to your doctors before you do it. But anyway, I have been using ashwagandha and I've absolutely loved it. Now, when I read about ashwagandha, I wanted to look and see if it was something that we could possibly grow in Utah. And everything that I read online sounded like it could not be grown here because it's a perennial herb that is very, very frost sensitive. Now, when I was reading those things, I was like, well, if you're harvesting it for the roots, you've got to dig it up anyway. So I decided to see if I could grow it as an annual and just harvest it for the roots at the end of the year. Now, last year was a huge success. I'll link a video up above that'll show you last year's harvest. I grew 7 plants and grew enough for about 2 years worth of ashwagandha roots for myself. So this year I only grew 3 plants, but I was curious about another thing. When I had harvested the ashwagandha last year, there were a ton of seeds that fell to the ground, and I just left them. And I was a little bit worried there were so many seeds that it would become something that was, kind of a little invasive. Well, maybe not invasive. It's not going to be invasive here, but something that would take over that spot of my garden. Well, in the spring, I waited and waited, and I did not see any growth from where the seeds fell. So I thought, okay, I guess it's just not going to regrow from seeds. But I was able to grow the plants that I'm going to show you now by the seed that I collected from last year. So the seed that I grew these from are from seeds from the plants that I grew. So this is going to be a self-sustaining plant for me. Then June came around and I noticed in the area that the ashwagandha had grown the previous year, a ton of tiny little plants. And I had 10 ashwagandha plants that had reseeded themselves. Now I have plenty, so I decided just to grow one and compare the root system of the one that sprouted in June that was reseeded and the ones that I grew from seed. Now, when I do grow them from seed, I want them to have a really long season to be able to develop their roots. So I start them in February and then I up-pot them to gallon-sized pots so that they have plenty of roots. So let's go show you the ones that I planted by seed and the ones that reseeded and then harvest them and compare. Now, what I found last year and from what I've read, ashwagandha does not like to stay extremely wet. Now, last year they grew really, really well over in that kind of a little bit of an open area between the fig trees that I've covered. They grew really well and they got watered maybe once a week. I decided to see how they would do with a little bit more water. This area here is watered along with this garden bed and got watered 2 or 3 times a week. And they did just fine. They look absolutely beautiful, but we're going to have to check the roots to see what they look like. Now, we had a late spring this year and it did take them a long time to get started and to get some size to them, so we'll see if that affected the roots. Now, this little guy over here is the ashwagandha that I left that reseeded itself. Now, the other plants, they've ripened their seeds, but this one has not ripened its seeds. So you could tell it did get a little bit of a slow start. Now, the ashwagandha plants over here have ripened their seeds. I'll show you what that looks like. Let's harvest one. This is what the ripe ashwagandha seeds look like. So let's open this up. And you really, like one of these seed pods is going to grow you a ton of ashwagandha plants. So I have so many. I've been giving them away, and I have enough to plant for this next year, but I'll save the seeds that I find here and save them for next year. But that's ashwagandha seeds. Now, ashwagandha is easy to harvest. All you need to do is just find where the roots are. I'm going to use a digging fork at first to see if I can dig them out without damaging the roots. Yeah, this is going to work just fine. So we're going to pry it out of the ground on both sides. And then gently pull it up. Now it looks like we've got a decent sized root system on this. I'm sure that it could be bigger. They were bigger last year, but we've got some really good sized roots. So what I'm going to do with this plant is I am going to harvest all the seeds. I'm going to cut the tops off, compost those, and then I'm going to hose off the roots and wash those really, really well. Let's harvest the rest of them first and show you what they look like. Okay, I think I found the new way I'm going to grow ashwagandha here in Utah. This plant right here is the plant that looked like it wasn't as mature, that reseeded itself. This is the one that I grew in a pot. Now look at the root system of this one. It's kind of hairy. We've got a couple of good sized roots on it, like this one right here, and the one around the back. But look at the size of roots on these plants that reseeded themselves. They're huge. But I think what I'm going to do is take several of these seeds and I'm going to plant them around where I want the ashwagandha next year. And then I'll grow some more in pots just in case. But we're going to see if they reseed themselves again next year. If they do, this is going to be one of the easiest care plants I've ever had in my entire life. I am really, really excited about this experiment. So let's harvest the seeds, then I'll go show you where I decide to plant them, and then we'll see how they do next year. So harvesting the seeds is really easy. All you do is you find the little papery husks that have turned brown, and then pull the little red seed pod out of it. Now for the ones that I'm going to save indoors, what I do is I squeeze all the seeds out of that husk. Then I put them in a bowl of water, let the outside gunky stuff kind of come off. Then I wipe them all off with a paper towel, let them dry, and then put them in envelopes. And then I think I'm just going to plant these whole little red pods in the ground, just barely bury them, because I didn't bury any of them last year. They just kind of were there. So they were just kind of on the ground all winter. So that's what I'll do with these. So let's finish harvesting. Now I didn't get anywhere near the amount of seeds that I got last year, but I got plenty to be able to grow some more next year. And then here's the self-sown ashwagandha and the size of their roots. This is the pot grown that I grew indoors. We've got a good sized root on that one, but the rest of them are really fibrous. This one is mostly fibrous roots. Then we've got some pretty decent sized roots on these. Now the other difference that I'm just going to stress the other difference that I noticed is that the reseeded ashwagandha started really late and it did not have time to mature the seed pods. But the ones that grew in pots absolutely had enough time to ripen their seeds. So if we get an earlier spring next year, I'm wondering if these will sprout earlier and have time to ripen seed pods. We're just going to keep experimenting and see what happens. Now, because the ashwagandha did just fine in this area where it got more water, I am going to throw a few seeds in here. We're going to throw the dehydrated old ones, and we're going to throw some of the softer ones in here. And we're just going to cover them up just a little bit, not too much, just to kind of mimic what happened last year. And then just leave this. We'll leave this through the winter and see what happens. We're going to do that in each one of these spots, and then we're going to take more seeds over to where it's drier and where it reseeded itself from last year. So I'm just going to throw some seeds in just the same spot that it grew, because I like this spot. This spot is out of the way. So when growing ashwagandha, there's just a couple of things to remember. Number one is it's extremely frost sensitive. So you need to plant it out after all chance of frost has passed. The next thing is it doesn't like a ton of water. Put it in an area that's not going to stay really wet. It also seems to benefit from a good deal of mulch. Last of all, don't fertilize it. I fertilize them as they're growing in the pots just so that they can get some good size, and because potting medium does not have a lot of fertilizer in it anyway. But once I plant them outside, I don't fertilize them. I didn't even fertilize the planting hole when I planted them. You want to grow them for the roots, not for the leafy green tops. So I would love to hear if you've tried growing ashwagandha in a colder climate and what your success rate has been. So I am really hopeful that this is just an excellent, easy crop to grow here in Utah, where I don't even have to start them indoors. That would be amazing. It worked out beautifully this year, and I kind of wish I would have left all of the other ones in ground and not grown the ones in the pots. Although I guess I did want to collect some seed. But hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden.